Hi, Eve.
Hello.
Hello. I guess we have Pat's background, but not Pat.
Evidently, he's got the room open for us and he's taken off. He'll be back.
I really enjoyed your story. I wasn't quite sure on some of the wordings that I mentioned, whether that was intentional.
Yeah. Yeah, I did change the one thing to make it sure that Mona was going to die eventually and would be buried there. And the other one, I've got to look at it and think about it. Oh,
so her mother-in-law outlived her.
Yeah, her mother-in-law is still alive, but Susie's trying in every way she can to convince her that she doesn't have to take her back to Utah to bury her.
Yeah.
Then once she gives in and promises, then she's going to do everything she can to keep that promise. It's hard.
Well, I didn't see the ending till right when it got there, No, that was.
Well, when I started writing it, I didn't see the ending either. The issue that I had was I'd written it from Susie's point of view, and then all of a sudden I really wanted to explain what happened with the guy that stole the truck, and yet an abrupt change of point of view in the middle of the story didn't seem like a good idea. And then I got so I ended up doing it a different way.
Yeah,
and it works.
No, it works very well. It's
makes you go back and think and wonder if she was hearing her mom's voice all this time. We thought she was imagining it.
Well, I think that's the bit, is that, you have lots of people's voices inside your head.
Yeah.
So I think all of us had the voices of people long gone speaking to us inside our heads.
Right. So, yeah, the story had its roots in my oldest sister passed away about 3 weeks ago.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Yeah, but she'd had a long battle with cancer and was in a lot of pain. Last summer, it exploded and went into her bones, and it exploded, and there wasn't enough bone structure for them to go in and put a pin. And so she's lived with this pain of this broken arm in her left arm since last summer.
No, I think there's a certain time when it's just time for people to go.
Yeah, and so while I miss her, but anyway, I got this text from her daughter, and they were on their way to from Kellogg, Idaho to Montpelier, where they were going to bury her, and they had borrowed a truck, and that they were transporting the coffin themselves.
Oh, I see. So,
and my husband was saying, "Can they do that?" He says, "Is that legal?" And I thought, okay. So I went and looked, and sure enough, in California, because for $12 you can get a permit that allows you to transport.
$12.
$12, yeah, with the government. I mean, that's where that figure came from.
So then I started, changed in many years.
Hi, you guys. Sorry to be a few minutes late.
Wow, it looks like you just walked out of that scenery.
It did. It was impressive.
Those virtual backgrounds are a little strange, all right.
I really need to get a light facing me, because I'm always in the dark unless it's early morning. But
yeah, I think I'm okay. I have a light that I can turn on if I need to, but I think my face comes out okay. When I went to a storytelling conference, and they were talking about storytelling with video cam, and this one gal says she had a 3-point system, that she had light from behind, from the side, and from in front, in order to make sure that she had a. So when I did my storytelling, I've started doing some storytelling on Zoom. I've been paying attention to that.
Cool.
Yeah, I need to get one. When I did participate in a panel session, and I had to be lit right, and they did a rehearsal, I had to get my bedside lamp and face pointed towards me. So I need to get an extra lamp but you end up short on electrical outlets too, and you wonder how much stuff you want to one
Right.
change.
Yeah, I
Let
have
me
a,
take a
I
minute
have
and I'll
a,
get something for you. Just a second. I'll be right
I
back.
have a light that I bought to use with art stuff, and it can be adjusted, and that's worked well when I need to have a front light.
Yeah, that I need to look up and find something like that.
So, now this one's on a little swivel base, and I can adjust it, how much high I want, whatever. It was fun last night. My kids came online and we did storytelling, and at the end of each story they were critiquing kind of a thing, and they're saying, watch the light. Well, Pat's got a gadget.
Yeah, my neighbor who's a photographer suggested this item here, and I'll turn off this virtual background so you'll see how messy my office is, but maybe it can showcase it a little better. Just a moment now. So this is a product called Loom, and it can also be used on cameras, but in this case it's got a little tripod that you can use, and you charge it up, or you can keep it plugged in to a USB port to keep it powered up. And I don't know how powered up it is right now, but just a second and I'll turn it on and see if it is.
So it's LUME?
Yeah, LUME. And so it makes for a quite potent lighting, and it can also be used on, if you search for it, they're all over the web in terms of pushing this product right now. And it also has, for photographers, you can adjust, see if I can find it here. Yeah, you can adjust the color temperature. So there's someplace in here, there's a spot to.
Oh, so you can make it look good and hide your wrinkles.
Yeah, well, you can have it be more hotter or cooler light, whatever that means for those of you who are, I guess that's more like, when you have bulbs that are cool white or daylight or those sorts of things. So at any rate, that's.
I notice it when I get a mixture. I've got a mixture of ones that are kind of like bluish light and pinkish light.
Right. So I'll set that aside, but it is, I'm also thinking it might be handy for, I've not been very successful in the use of external flashes on my camera, which back in the olden days, I used to take pictures at our Tri-Valley Writers meetings pre-pandemic, or Rotary Club meetings and so forth. But so John had indicated that he's not going to join us tonight, but do you guys want to chat about anything else, or do you want to get going?
We can get going. I just hope at some point we get some more people to join in the group, because you start wondering if we have critical mass.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what the likelihood of that is, but you might be able to check out with the leadership and see whether they have any clues about that, or if they want to promote it or anything.
Well, I didn't learn about it until I'd been in the club for about a year, and I wish I'd known earlier. So
well, it's interesting. What I think, I know at least for a time, I don't know if they're still doing it now, but when people join, there's an email that goes out like, welcome to Tri-Valley Writers, yada, yada, yada. And oh, by the way, if you're interested in critique, because I would see the emails come through, and often I would reply and say, yeah, if you're interested in critique, let me know, or welcome to the club or whatever. And so they used to do that. I don't know if they stopped doing it or not.
I don't recall seeing it when I joined. And so I heard about it at a meeting, and then I asked the wrong phrase, because, there's so many nuances in phrases in terms of what it is. But there may be a number of people, since this is a hobby that you can indulge in very nicely at the current time.
That's true.
Yeah.
Who would like to join.
I can certainly put it in the September newsletter. I'm now the newsletter editor.
Oh, so we're
that
speaking
sounds
to
great.
the person.
Ask and you shall receive. Well, all righty. When I pull up my Word document, who do I see but Eve's piece? Shall we start with you, Eve?
Yep.
And I got these out a little bit late this afternoon, but I wrote, Eve, I like the developing story regarding your specifics, what works and what doesn't work. I don't think there's too much on Buck's gambling. It seems to me like this is a serious matter. I don't know how it plays out, but it seems like it's worthy of attention. And regarding whether there's too many quotes, it feels like there are, but I don't know which I'd cut instead. And I think we've talked about this before. Maybe as it comes together, there needs to be a way to fashion more of the narrative, which may involve more explanation and trimming back the quotes. So that tried to address your third question about whether there should be more explanation. But I wrote, I think it's tricky and a delicate balance to select the diary passages that do justice to and honor Ruth's materials and weave them into a compelling read. And then I also marked a few minor places where I suggested clarifications and a word correction, but nothing really worth sharing. But that's what I wrote. And I don't know if it got to you before this session or not, or if you had a chance to look at it, but
yes. I had a chance to look at both yours and Ruth's. And so it's always useful to me when I see both people coming from the same place.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things is, some of these quotes, when I read them, were just so colorful.
Yes.
I'll play around and see whether it's cutting or adding, because it may be amplifying and adding more explanation, because I know it's always, put more of yourself in, more of the connectors. And I'm trying to do that without giving away too much of the plot. I think you also had a comment about what's it mean to be on the latch. And I know since that was one of her phrases, I grew up with that. And that meant a door was shut but not locked. I don't know, Ruth, have you ever heard that phrase, on the latch?
I haven't.
Okay, so I need to change that the door, it means that the door is shut but not locked.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was something I wasn't familiar with and wasn't sure about it. So,
because I know there's the phrase a latchkey child also.
Yeah, you could leave the phrase in on the latch and then add a sentence that says, which means that Ruth didn't lock the door.
Something like that, because it is part of it. It's a quote, right? It's part of her diary entry. So you can't be just taking nilly-willy license with her diary entries, but then you can, as Ruth said, provide a little information for the reader that's not part of her diaries, not her speaking from her diary.
Well, what I'm
minor point
trying to do is what I've come around to, and I know as soon as I get a complete first draft, I'm going to go right back to the beginning and start rewriting again, because at this point I think I want to rewrite the introduction when I get back around through the cycle, is that I see it very much as a character study. And so what I'm trying to do at this point is sort of bring in characters as they kind of bounce off Ruth on the character development, because, and how it kind of came together in the aspect of, I guess what I'm sort of crystallizing on now is what's it take to succeed in a poorly compensated but highly competitive field, of which there are many. And so it's that aspect of just kind of tunnel vision persistence and the various character flaws that come in along with that. So it's been I've been bouncing stuff off some of my siblings at this point, and it's a fascinating experience in that I've totally reversed some of the things some of the impressions I've long held in terms of what was going on. So I haven't gotten up to that point yet, but there were things that where I've totally changed my mind about what happened. And so
it's a fascinating and interesting thing. You really have your work cut out for you. And I think it's you've kind of been called to do this, and it's a really special thing to be able to do, but boy, it's not easy. I can appreciate that.
It's going to take iterations, and that's why this is very valuable to me, just kind of figuring out the style that works, what doesn't work. And there's so many people coming into her life, and how do I explain that but don't overwhelm it and keep the focus on her. And so that's because she had some very, she had her strengths and she certainly had some wild weaknesses. So
I mean, she was a real person. That's great. So she's an interesting character, right? I mean, that's
so that's the challenge for me. But this is useful, kind of going back and so trying to figure out how much of the quotes to keep and how to work it in, because there's so much material, and trying to sieve it and say, sometimes too much less is more.
yeah.
And that's what I was trying to do is, like, what's this say about her? And part of what I was trying to accomplish in this is, why is she throwing herself at this guy who is not a perfect specimen,
Right.
and ignoring everything else? And that's where, I sort of came around to, it's that, thinking about various stuff, it's that animal attraction, that indescribable thing, that where it's like there are all those odd couples in the world. And
Yeah, the pheromones, as you mentioned.
yeah, you can overlook all this other stuff, but it was, because he's not nice to her, he insults her, there's the religious difference, he's unreliable, he's gambling, and so why him?
Yeah.
And
We'll have to see how that sorts out.
And he's borrowing significant amounts of money, and I don't see anything about him returning any of it.
Yeah. So it's, but so what I was trying to have come across there, it's a very odd choice, but clearly, that was what she wanted. I mean, she had poor old Paul hanging in there, and, it wasn't that Paul was gay, later on in the story, it goes on. I mean, but there he was, you would have thought he would have been a much better fit for her. They went off, they did the artistic stuff that Buck, was kind of like, his idea of a good time was a racetrack, whereas with Paul, it was let's cook, let's, go to the art galleries, go to the concerts. And yet that's what she was after. And so trying to figure out how to convey that aspect is a challenge, because you'd say Paul, if you looked at the stuff, was a better fit, but he wasn't the one she wanted.
There you go. Well, you have your work cut out for you. So, Rose, what do you have to say about Eve's piece?
Well, yeah, I was with you. I thought, yes, there were probably too many quotes, but I wouldn't know which ones to cut out. I found myself kind of skimming them, because there's quote after quote after quote, and kind of skimming instead of really reading. And then I went back and read again, and I said, yeah, the story is here, the line is here. And I'm wondering, Eve, if it would help you with this particular chapter, if you sat down and just simply wrote it out without putting any quotes in, just write out the narration of it, the whole thing, and then take a look to see which quotes go in to support the narration that you've got.
That's an interesting angle.
I think that's a good suggestion, because it's looking at that and trying to say, what is here? What am I trying to develop about the character at this point?
I mean, this whole string of quotes is almost like your outline. This is what belongs in this chapter. And now if you just set those quotes aside and write that chapter, and then come back and see which quotes really fit in. I mean, it's like, and there may be other quotes too. One of the questions that I had was she worried about being pregnant? And there was that one sentence that indicated that maybe she was worried that she'd gotten pregnant.
Yes, after a long time, right?
There at the end that she thought the birth control might have failed at one point, but that's all I know, is that then she got her period.
Okay, so she wasn't sharing on that.
I think she was worried at that point.
Yeah, so apparently she was worried. And the other thing that kind of came to my mind was that the roulette wheel. There's one quote that indicates she was not going to buy him a roulette wheel. And then there was a comment about why did she buy the roulette wheel? And then came the quote that said that she gave it to him for his birthday. So it seemed like the sequence was out of sequence because when I see that second quote that you know, why did she buy the roulette wheel? I'm thinking, wait a minute, she said she wasn't going to do that, you know, kind of a thing.
I think she was teasing him that, you know, he was guessing things, but I think you're right. I think I need to write it out and then have it flow through more. There were, at that point in time, there are a lot of gambling issues, you know, in woven through there.
And was there any indication whether these two guys knew about each other?
Yeah, they knew about each other.
And was there jealousy or, you know?
She never talked about that, you know, because Buck in effect was sort of saying, date other people, date other people. He didn't want to settle down. That you missed some of the chapters, but that was kind of his thing, was that he wasn't ready to get married, didn't want to settle down, and he kept saying, you know, date other people.
So, okay, and Paul was just being the nice guy.
I don't know whether, you know, exactly that, since I know less about that one. I think he was there. I think the fact that after she got married, then he moved away to Virginia and got married, may have been thinking, you know, she'll notice me and pay attention. And she never, you know, whatever it was, that romantic spark, because kind of early on in some of them, when she was flirting with various people in her art school circle, you know, she would flirt with him, but somehow or other, that's where I finally came down to the fact that, you know, it must be that indescribable, you know, whatever, whether it's the smell or whatever, the pheromones,
Yeah,
are the spark, the animal magnetism between people. That just because somebody looks right on paper, they're not.
and maybe she wanted a more exciting life, and Paul didn't look like that.
Well, she certainly didn't. Well, you missed some. She certainly didn't want somebody who was forever showing up late or not showing up and telling her to go find somebody else. So it's sort of that. Why has she picked him out of all the fish in the sea? So it's that indescribable thing of what makes somebody decide this one's the person.
And, you know, this is just way out in left field, but, you know, having decided to go all the way and giving him virginity back in that era, then did she feel that made a commitment to him? That
I know she agonized over it. She was very embarrassed by it. She certainly, it was never something that I forget at what point in my life I suddenly started suspecting it. But it was something that I almost wonder, you know, in terms of some of the conversations offline, if it's something she may have discussed with some of the women she talked with, if it was part of a strategy or what it was, or if she was just so oversexed at that point, she decided that, you know, I'll try this, and if it doesn't work, I don't know what I'll do. So that was something where I was trying to figure it out. You know, she was definitely trying to hustle him along, and usually that's not the way you hustle him along. It's usually with withholding rather than yielding.
yeah.
So probably what I need to do is add a lot of this discussion in and flesh out what's going on.
Yeah, so sometimes even stating possibilities you know, making sure that it's stated as your possibility that possibly this was the way that she was thinking, rather than stating it as fact, because you want it to be factual.
Yeah, because I don't know. I don't know what tipped, you know, because you missed kind of the chapter where I'm not sure if it's in this one, you know, where she's going and getting the diaphragm and just absolutely humiliated, you know, that they're calling her Mrs. instead of Miss. You know, she's just feeling very shamed by it all. So, because I don't know if she ever talked about it with anyone, because I forget at what point I started thinking, you know, with some of her stories, I started thinking like, what was going on? You know, so she never, at least to me, admitted it. So I guess
lots of good stuff to work with. You have interesting work ahead of you.
What?
You have interesting work ahead of you. There's no doubt about it.
Yes. Well, it's an interesting project, as I said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if only we had Hector. You know, I was going to tell you, I was on a Zoom call with a former writing class from that Kelly Essery used to run, and Hector Tamorian joined the Zoom session. So it was really fun to see Hector, as I think of him always as to, well, which way do we go? Who do we do next? So, but it's easy enough. We can either do Rose or we can do Pat. So.
Well, should we do yours so you're not always last?
Well, we didn't mind. We made sure I wasn't last the last time, but that's fine. I just would pull it up, I guess. And I got both your comments. I'd been crashing out on other stuff, so I didn't digest them that thoroughly, but I did get your comments, so I have those available to me.
I opened up the wrong one. Oh, there it is. Bingo. Yeah, I think in reading this, Pat, you know, you know, getting more into the story, I think one of the challenges you've got in this section is you've got a lot of background material you want to get out. And that, you know, in terms of the relationship between the governments here, and there's that bit of always show, don't tell. And so maybe Rose has got some ideas, but you've got so much you've got so much background you're trying to squeeze into some of this dialogue that I think it becomes cumbersome. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how you show some of these things perhaps more dramatically. It might be almost imagining what it would be like if this were turned into a movie. Mm-hmm. You know, how would you show the relationship between the three different groups in this room? And to me, some of this sounds really dangerous, you know, when you've got, you know, I mean, with all the corruption there, going in and being the straight person to clean this up would be incredibly dangerous. You know, you don't know if your own people are going to betray you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, that was what I was thinking of, is like, you know, if you're from Belize and you're told to go out there, you know, if you're some young lieutenant or something and told to go out there and clean some of this up, sounds like a suicide mission. You don't know who's going to kill you.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know how in some of this to take it from a conversation, which is a quieter thing, and show it. But that was the thing I came away with when I'm reading through this, and I'm going like, oh, gee, dealing with this, whoever's on the spot to go out, if you're in a Belize citizen and try to deal with it. I mean, that's a suicide mission.
Well, so but I understand your points that the way as it's written right now, that the dialogue is being used to convey too much background information and stuff that turns it into things that are not as on the mark as to how people really talk. So that's an understandable comment, and I appreciate it.
And maybe you could say more, where they're telling the people in Belize to clean it up, and when the system's that corrupt, I mean, clearly this is going to be turning people who've been buddies behind the scenes in corruption against each other. And I would think that there might be quite a bit of bloodshed at all levels there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm not familiar with the story, but when I started seeing this, I'm going like, oh my,
Well, that's the challenge. I understand the challenge. I don't quite know the fix for it yet, but I understand what the suggestion is, and it's a good one. So thank you.
So I mean, it's tough, because I was reading through this and I could understand what you were saying. And at the same time, I was thinking, how would Hollywood portray this situation when they're sending the hero in to the suicide mission?
Yeah, I was the same way. There's a lot of narration, a lot of info dumping. There we go.
Yeah,
Kind of a thing. Now, I mean, I made one suggestion right when he's talking and he says, I'm going to talk plainly here. And he says, we all know you. I mean, there's a good opportunity in that particular paragraph for us to see him pacing the room, stopping in front of one of them and saying, you, and pointing his finger at him, and then, turning it and describing him talking to the other person, so that we see them, and maybe the reactions that are in the next paragraph down then work into this paragraph.
That might be a good tack to try and take, is just to break up this dialogue, skinny it down, make more actions, make more gestures, make more physical movements of people.
I'm going to make another radical suggestion. I don't know if it'll work or not, but you might actually find that you start this chapter in a different place. Maybe you start at this meeting when you kind of called on the carpet and says, now, this guy got hurt. How did this happen?
That's an idea.
And then instead of it being this narration of it, you've got this guy reporting it. And, we were, and then you've got the back and forth between the two of the actions, or whatever. The guy nods his head, or a startled look on his face, or telling him this was supposed to be just a patrol, or this was not supposed to be this way, kind of a thing. And yeah, but the guys were shooting at us. What could we do, kind of a thing, So maybe starting the whole thing in a different place, with the guy being called on the carpet and trying to explain how this guy got shot.
I just had an idea while you were saying that, because there's so many factors in here. Have you read Herman Wouk's Winds of War?
I don't think I have.
Well, where basically you have the main character, and Herman Wouk somehow or other manages to have him at all these pivotal points. And he's experiencing, World War II. Somehow he's always landing right in the middle of the action. And his personal experiences, and I haven't read it in years, but his personal experiences his backstory is in with the broad scope of what's going on
Okay.
in World War, you know, at the outbreak of World War II. And then the second one is later in it, but he manages to have his character be right there for a whole bunch of pivotal. I mean, it it beggars belief, as they would say.
Okay.
It works. You could have it that way, that your hero somehow or other, you know, who's bulletproof hero, somehow or other manages to be present in various scenes where it's happening chronologically to him, and that he becomes the reader's, you know, he's their focus, and you're learning it through him as he learns it.
Okay.
The other thought that occurred to me in this fight scene is, we know that the one guy got shot, but what about the ones that almost got shot? The ones that had the bullet go whiz by their ear, kind of a thing. You know, or they hit the ground and the bullets went over their head, kind of a thing, and splintered in a tree trunk behind them, kind of a thing.
Got it.
So, you know, you've got the near misses that happen, and I'm sure they were there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you could certainly, this is fiction, so you can make it be whatever you like. And that's a way to do that, I think.
You know, because you've had these various chapters, but if you do take a look at Winds of War, in that, you know, you have drastically different things going on, but there's this one character who takes you through it. You know, and he has his love interest and the love story and everything else going on, but it's against the whole backdrop of Winds of War is what's leading up to World War II, and then War and Remembrance is more the war part.
Mm-hmm.
But that way, you know, if you had a consistent central person and it's bouncing off him.
I get the idea. I'll have to give some thought about that. But I understand again, I understand the point of how one might use that kind of a construct. Well, all right,
Everything else I said was kind of minor, and it's covered in what I sent you.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Rose. I appreciate both of your comments. Those are good, helpful suggestions.
Yeah, because I mean, I haven't ever followed it. So looking at this mess, you wonder how they ever did clean it up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know.
Well, there was nothing like the government of Belize having to recognize that the UK and the US were going to cut off funds to them. And they had a choice, basically get in line or let the grafters and the thugs who were involved in the business take all the money and lose the big money coming in from the governments and having development continue and so forth. So that's the choice they basically, in my fictionalized approach to it, that they have to make. And that's basically the idea. Hey, it's just business. Bust them.
But I mean, clearly they were sacrificing amongst their own. I mean, they didn't all, or did they all get together at the top and vote to come clean?
Well, it's muddied. It's muddied, and Belize is a small government. There's only like 17 members of parliament. So, and the people who have these portfolios, like two of them that are pointed to as Ministry of Works or whatever, who is literally up in northern Belize, people would go and take the airfields out of commission in these outlying communities, and the public works vehicles and equipment would be deployed to put them back on the air. You know, that was, I mean, he was in the game.
So did he cross over and clean up personally, or did the others have to take him out?
They forced him out. They basically took down the industry, and then, you know, then it wasn't attractive to him. And that family is still around. Their ancestors and their progeny are still political players in Belize, in northern Belize.
Because I
the
wonder,
Single family.
So how many families were in this that were fighting effect?
I'd have to go back and try and reconstruct that. There are a few key players, like I know the Briseños in the Ministry of Works, and there's one other ministry. I think he has a brother or a cousin that was in that was heavily involved. But it's a small place. You know, at that time it was not even 300,000 people. So this is like a small town kind of corruption, if you will, fueled by high octane coke smuggling and and basically the Iran Contra guns for drugs trade that was washing through the 80s and so forth. So that's
I'm
the
just
time frame.
wondering, if you started from the top, and you had the people who would actually witness this, how many of them you'd need to fictionalize, and whether or not you could create fictionalized witnesses of various types in there who could become, your main hero, your main villain, and you always want shades of gray in there.
Well, a number of them are now dead. So you have only the worries about their ancestors or their progeny suing you, like the Prime Minister of Belize at the time, George Price. When I came through this last time through Central America, I was sitting in the international airport bar, and this guy, I forget, somehow he heard me talking a little bit about it. He said, "Oh yeah, I remember being at Carver Ranch for Thanksgiving one year, and I remember George Price coming to this lumbering operation we were running with me and my partners back in the day, and saying, 'Oh, you guys drop all this and just go get in the drug trade, won't you? Just go grow weed instead of doing this lumbering business.'" So there's a random anecdote from this, expat American who's still hanging out in Belize, decades later, recalling having had Thanksgiving dinner at the Carver Ranch operation where a lot of these activities are centered, and two, citing an anecdote where the premier of Belize shows up at some job that he and his partners are trying to do lumber or sawmill work, telling the Belizeans, "Oh, don't bother working here, just go get in the drug trade." So there's all kinds of anecdotal stuff that you can choose to pick and cherry pick from to try and tell these stories.
Well, if you're worried about being sued, you could always have it be a fictional country.
Yeah, that's true.
Exactly where Belize is.
Yeah, you can try that stuff
And
too.
then
First, you need to get the story together, and then you can worry about whether you have to worry about threats on your life or lawsuits.
I think what you need is, as I said, take a look at Winds of War in terms of having, major events unfold, is, through going characters that you get people invested in. And I think people always like the ambiguous characters that you don't know if they're a good guy or a bad guy.
That's a thought too.
Like Harrison Ford type characters in Star Wars. You're not quite sure, can he be bought in the beginning type thing.
Yeah.
So.
Well, lots of ideas for me to chew on, that's for sure. So there's, I need to kind of get this thing gathered up again and see where I'm at with it. But there's a lot of it.
But it might, maybe a combination of fictionalizing and if you're worried about getting sued.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you disguise things just enough, people aren't going to want to come forward and say, "Hey, that was me."
There you go.
Because I got away with that, because right after I retired, I wrote a book on dual career couples. And actually it was the reviewers who said I was pitching a book toward management. They said, no, that's not your audience. Your audience is the individuals. And so I turned the whole thing around, wrote a new outline for them, which they then accepted. And I put in where people were good, I identified them. I was using examples. When there are bad examples, I just said, for instance, you could have this situation, or I just fictionalized it. And that book came out in 2016. So I'm assuming I'm okay at this point. I talked about a VP of HR and stuff like that. I only ever worked for 2 giant corporations my whole career. You know, it wouldn't take much to figure out who people were, but they weren't about to say, hey, how dare you? That was me.
Yeah, yeah.
And since I'd retired, I could care less what they thought. So there were a number of people where I just put them out there as sort of, you know, you could have this, you know, or just didn't fully identify them. And so far, no ill effects.
There you go. Yeah.
So, you know, you could just leave enough wiggle room. It's like, well, I didn't identify that person.
Yeah, all those are things I'll have to consider.
And there's something to be said for plugging your way through the book and getting it all done, and then coming back and editing
Yep.
and sorting
Yep.
these out. That, you know, you can get stuck on one chapter and edit.
Right. No, I hear you, Rose.
So
Yeah, this is kind of a big complex whip that's been put together with a lot of vignettes and essentially sequences and scenes without having started with a real clear outline. So instead it was put together with scene cards and developed that way. So.
and when you get through with doing that, just having pushed through with a rough draft, then you can begin to take a look at it and say, well, was this important or not?
Sure. Yeah.
My first book, I ended up throwing out the whole first chapter and starting it with chapter 2.
There you go. Yeah,
So,
I happened to glance over on the shelf there, and there's a memoir called "Oh, the Glory of It All" by Sean Wilsey, and that's a son of Dee Dee Woolsey, the big San Francisco philanthropy mover and shaker who's been thrown off of or run out of boards like for the DeYoung and some of those things. But this is a very unflattering book about her and his childhood and so forth. But he, someplace along the line, I remember hearing him say, you have to write a lot of this stuff before you know what you can throw away. So,
Yeah,
well, anyway, these are good suggestions. I appreciate them.
yeah. Because I think, you know, if you came up with a, you know, a Harrison Ford type character.
Yeah, well, the characters I have are the really bad guys and a few really good guys and a lot of people in between. So,
But an in-between person who could be the witness on the spot, you know, where you're never quite sure, is he good or is he bad?
right. Indeed. Well, that leaves us with Miss Rose.
okay.
Well, I would start. I wrote Rose. I really like this piece. Funny business indeed at the end. I thought the narrator's monologue and the dialogue with Mom, both in her head and as remembered, really reveals the characters. The cadence has a short and snappy quality I quite like. Clean writing. I didn't see places to make suggestions. So I really enjoyed this piece a lot, Rose. I really did. So not much yield for how to improve it.
It feels pretty finished, really.
Yeah, that's the way it felt to me when I read it. And I really like it. So we'll see what Miss Eve has to say about it.
I also really liked it. There are just a couple of places where I had some questions. You know, Rose and I were talking when you were off getting stuff together about whether or not her mother's mother-in-law was already in the cemetery or not. Some of the tenses on there, and you know, a couple of the sounds in there. But I thought it was a great story. One of the only other things that struck me as a little odd is that I'm sort of one of those people who's always been taught never leave your purse behind. So I get you're losing the truck. But why did she leave her purse in there when it was unlocked?
She was only going to be in the bathroom for a minute.
I know, but I guess I've been to enough third world countries where it's like, I was even told, you know, don't even hang it on the, you know, you got to have it on your body. You don't ever put it down. you know, so uh, that was just one thing was like leaving the purse in there for a second because I could see the truck getting away, you know, forgetting the keys in there. She runs out the door, but would she have really left her?
So, yeah, now, I had one question. John commented and said that he thought that itemizing all of the costs of the funeral and whatever interrupted the flow of the narrative. Did you notice that at all? I thought they were good details.
They didn't strike me as a problem. I thought, you know, because the thing that comes through is, you know, this person is not equipped to pay for this darn thing, and there are all these promises that the mom had extracted, and yet she's stuck with, you know, all these things. And so I didn't find, I'm just scrolling through, and that for me, there's one paragraph where there's a few things in there, you know, and I didn't see, it doesn't go on and on. So I don't agree with that comment being a problem.
Yeah, I sometimes specific details work good. I mean, I didn't itemize what the casket costs at Walmart. I just, this was half the cost of the one at the funeral home.
I didn't know Walmart sold caskets.
I actually looked online, and I did some research online to come up with those figures actually, and the cheapest cactus at a funeral home is about $2,000, and Walmart you could order one for $1,000.
Well, there you go.
And
Well,
you know, that's where I got those figures. Is I went online and did some research on saying, okay.
So have you got a target place you're thinking of submitting this, Rose? Or what?
Don't. I'm gonna look for one because I think that it's worth submitting somewhere.
Yeah. Well, you know, it'll be a couple years before we do another anthology for our branch, but you know, if it isn't published somewhere else, that's a thought. And I don't know when Las Positas will open up their anthology again. That's an annual one.
Next March.
Okay.
Their anthology just went out. I've got a piece in the Las Positas anthology.
Oh, congratulations.
This year, and I've got 2 going into the Tri-Valley Riders.
Oh, the CWC one, or our own branch one, yeah.
Our own branch one, yeah.
I forget. I've just been swamped enough. I haven't been paying attention to the deadlines on some of those. But
yeah, well, the deadlines were just about the same time of the year. They were this spring.
Got it. Okay.
Maybe somebody's putting something together for Halloween. You might find out if anybody's putting anything together because you got a ghost story here.
Yeah, no, there was something, I can't remember where it was. I saw something that they were looking for paranormal stories, and I thought, oh, gee, you know, and I looked at it and said, and I thought, you know, but I don't know, maybe I'll Google on the internet and see if I can figure out something. My daughter, who writes science fiction, she might have a suggestion as to where it could be sent to, because
I just think it's very appealing. I think it's a very likable story. And then it's got these live wire, like you say, paranormal aspects.
Well, that was a writer's gimmick, actually, kind of a thing, because I realized that I wanted to talk about the guy that stole the track, but I didn't want to change point of view in the middle of the story. I'd done it all from Susie's point of view, kind of a thing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's kind of like having that character that ties everything together, and so she needed to be involved in it. And
I always wonder, you know, on some things, you know, whether online with things, you know, if there's any way, you know, if there are any places you post something like this and just put it up, you know, that to kind of make your name and get recognition with it. You know, if there are any online things that take stuff like this.
I'm sure there are. I just don't know them offhand. I mean, there's a whole mix of things. You know, there occasionally the branch, or our Tri-Valley branch, puts out something with, you know, with information about contests or things that are looking for pieces and so forth. But you'll probably find a bunch if you just Google that.
Yeah,
search for it.
I can check with my daughter Nancy, who publishes science fiction, who writes science fiction. The other thing that I might do is ask Kelly Estuary, because her daughter is involved in some editing and some publication. I can't remember this.
She might have a suggestion there. Yeah.
She might have a suggestion. Yeah.
We ran into her yesterday at the post office. So it's a small world. And she.
Yeah, I've got to talk to Kelly anyway, because this is the proof copy of my third book.
Oh.
And
cool.
it's shorter than the other two books. This is the advantage of self-publishing, because I said that was how long it took me to tell the story, and that's how long it is now. But they wouldn't put, I couldn't put anything on the spine. And then I had this bright idea, and so the last fourth of the book is actually the pieces that the chapter that I took out that didn't get published, and the pieces that I wrote in creative writing class about this character.
Oh.
That didn't make it into the book. It's what I did, and let me see what you think of this introduction since we're here, is here at the end, it's, where is it? It's under bonus materials is what it says.
Bonus
it says, have you ever wondered where the idea for the books came from? How the author developed characters? The decisions the author had to make, whether the author started with characters or plot, what things were left out. Perhaps this collection of bonus materials will give you some insight on those issues. And then each of these pieces that I put in some comments about character developing, and there's one chapter that I rewrote from the aunt's point of view, and it really did help me to and so I've got all of this from page 105 to 147. this bonus material, and so I've got the poem, the advice to Mary Lisa. There's a tour of Mary Lisa's world. The creative writing assignment in class was to write a description of your house, and I didn't feel like doing that, and so I ended up writing this piece as if it was a tour guide, taking people through Mary Lisa, the house where Mary Lisa. And she's saying, we'll tiptoe through the kitchen, and the two aunts are sitting at the table, and we just won't bother them, kind of a thing. And we'll go up the stairs, and on the left is the aunt's bedroom, and on the right is Mary Lisa's bedroom, and and this is, there's a lump on the bed, which makes me wonder if Mary Lisa's got Annie's journal hidden under the mattress again, kind of a thing. And so here's this tour guide of Mary Lisa's world. And then there's a poem of the adult fairy giving advice to her 10-year-old self, kind of a thing. And, there's a bunch of different things. There's the dragon. I don't know. Do you remember the dragon, Blackie, the dragon, who's actually a cat who's actually a dragon? He's made himself into a cat. And there's a whole thing that he explains how he, bragging, how he's black, the dragon, Black and Thor of the Flaming Mountain, and that in the dragon competitions he always wins, kind of a thing. There's this whole thing about this dragon, which obviously couldn't make it into the book because it'd be too much in there,
What a fun way to treat that material, Rose. That's clever. It's a neat idea.
And I'm really pleased with the when I got that idea, at first, I just kind of felt like it was just kind of sticking it in, and now it seems like it's an integral part of the book, that it's
that it's tied right in terms of, like you say, did you ever wonder about the choices that get made and this and this and this? And so, very clever. Well, you guys, this has been fun. Here we've done it again. One more notch in the critique group's ongoing things. So I think your suggestion, Rose, about perhaps seeing in the newsletter about reminding people that critique is around if people are interested.
I think that's good.
You can bounce it off the rest of the board or whatever and see. And we've had, it hasn't been much play. I don't know if you remember David Tron, but he asked, he didn't elaborate, but he said, could I take him off the list because he's got enough stuff going on that he doesn't want to be kept on there. He hasn't participated for quite a while, but Yeah,
Yeah,
any
at
rate.
one point I sent a copy of the list of everyone that this goes out to Lainey and said, you know, we ought to check this and compare it to the membership list, because if they're no
Yeah,
longer
we've
a
done that in
member.
the past.
Oh, you
but
did?
Well, not recently. We've done it in the past. Patricia had me do that a year or two, some years back, but it's been a while, so it's not a bad idea. And, you know,
Yeah.
there are clearly people who are not active anymore, but nobody bothers to say, take me off the list, except rarely.
Yeah. Well, when I get access to the membership list, I can actually look at it.
Sure. No, and if you want to
Because,
just, I'm
you
happy
know,
to
yeah,
modify the list to make
they,
sure,
you know,
'cause it's supposed to be a
but
member
it just
benefit.
seems to me that if they're not if they're no longer a member, that we need to take them off of that list. You know,
Yeah, that's
sometimes
definitely the case.
sometimes I think about it. I mean, here I am sending my writing out to a whole bunch of people,
Right.
and so it's kind of an act of faith in saying, okay, you know, you've been
Well,
a
I think
member of the
it's a
club.
good suggestion. I think it's a good suggestion to remind the board people that you know, we haven't checked the list, the email list for STEM critique against the membership for quite a while. Why don't we do that? And I'm happy to take the action. If somebody will send me, somebody wants to share the member list with me, I can certainly bang it against that and, you know,
Yeah, well,
remove the people who are not members.
as I said, well, I've got to get access to the membership list anyway, because I've got things like the Lost Positas anthology book. I've got it, and I need to go through it and see which ones of our club
Sure.
members had pieces in it. So I need the membership list to go through that kind
Yeah.
of a thing.
Whatever
And
makes it, whatever the handiest. If
and so I'm
somebody,
going to be dealing with that membership list and wading through it.
yeah.
So anyway,
A lot of people may not be aware it exists too.
well, this is it, and it's and I think that we need to. You tend to think if you need a critique group that you need a critique group that's like science fiction. And what I found is that that's not really essential, because good writing is good writing, whatever genre you're writing in. And we're all writing in different genres, and yet we're able to support and help each other because we're able to help. And so I think that needs to be pointed out, so that people who don't think, well, you know, I need to find a group that's writing the same thing I'm writing.
Right. Well, and I'm not sure, I can't remember how we communicate it to new members, but the way it used to be communicated is that if you're interested in critique, start with STEM. And then as you learn how we critique in the branch, then if you find or want to start a genre-specific critique group, more power to you. But start there. So I don't know how that's communicated to folks.
Well, see, and I've wondered, you know, how many critique groups do we have under the umbrella of California Writers?
People used to keep track of that. Lainey did for a while and tried to be a matchmaker. I think it's kind of informal. If you look on the webpage, I don't know that it has the specifics other than the poetry one and STEM. I'm not sure if there are other ones listed, but there are ones who've been running for a long time. Lainey's novel critique group has been going a long time, and so at any rate, it's a good thing to dig into if you're interested.
And the question is, I know that Lainey had the novel critique group. Is that under the umbrella of California Writers, or is that just a group of writers? See?
It has been a members, it has been a California Writers Tri-Valley Branch critique group, I believe, but I could be wrong. That's the way I understood it. And we've spun off probably over the years when I've been involved, we've probably spun off a half dozen. We had a memoir critique group for a time. We had another novel critique group for a time. And sometimes they sustain and sometimes they don't.
Yeah. So.
At any rate, you guys, it's been fun seeing you. Good suggestions. Thanks for your stuff, and hang in there. Stay safe and well.
Okay.
I'm gonna call it a wrap.
All right.
Going once,
Okay.
going twice,
Gone.
on three. All right. Good night, all.
Good night.